Okay,
Are we all ready?
take it away.
All right. Hey guys, my name's Beth. Um, I'm gonna be one of the trainers that's working with you along with another trainer named Sarah. And what we're talking about today is just some very basic AVImark information. So it's going to include how you add clients and patients into the software and how you're going to be putting medical history into the software as well. I think that you'll notice that once you start using AVImark, there's a lot of repetition. So if you're doing a certain keystroke to perform a function in one area, chances are you're going to be using the same keystroke to perform that function in another as well. So that being said, this is your main screen in AVImark. It's called the information display. A lot of times we'll refer to it as the CID. But basically, it's going to have your client information listed here at the top, your patient information listed here in the middle, and then basically the patient's medical history, everything that they've had done down here at the bottom. So if I wanted to add in a new client, what I would do is from the client area here, can everyone see how the work field is selected? That's where the cursor is blinking at currently. That's how I know that my client area is selected. So what I'm going to do from my client area is just right click, and then here I have my new option. Now anytime you're looking at these, if you see a function key listed all the way over to the right, that means you can also hit that function key and it'll do the same thing. So if you're more of a mouse person, there's going to be a way for you, and if you're more of a keyboard person, there's going to be a way for you as well. But simply selecting it is what's going to open up your new client window where you're going to be typing in your client information, their name, and of course their address. The telephone number field right here is searchable in AVImark, so it's very important that you make sure you're typing in the best phone number to reach the client at. And if you ever want to have AVImark have the capability of sending emails from within the program, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and start entering in your client email addresses as well. Now, that being said, underneath your contact information, you do have a personal information section. We've got a field for social security numbers and license numbers. Now, as you can tell, these fields are encrypted, so after you type that number in, no one but the administrator would be able to see it again. And these are specific state requirements for controlled substance reporting. So if your state doesn't require this information, it's not necessary for you to put it in here just to add in a new client. Your photo field here, not going to lie, is typically utilized more in the patient area, but if you had a client produce a photo of someone that they never wanted their patients released to, this could potentially be a spot where you could attach that photo. Your employer field is just an FYI field for you guys. If you wanted to type in where this client works, you can. And here you have your spouse field. And this is where you can type in the name of another person that this client states may be bringing in their patients. Now, you can see that there's a drop down next to spouse. You can select a more appropriate relationship if you'd like. So then you're just coming over here and typing in the name of that person, last name, comma, first name. And then what happens here in just a moment, I'll show you where you can add an action code. So it's just going to become a habit. If a client says, oh, this person may be bringing in my animals, you're going to type their name in the spouse field here and then give the client a specific action code. Like I said, we're going to get to that here in just a second. Preferred doctor is just an area where you can specify in AVImark if this client prefers one specific doctor. And you have two referral fields here where you can specify how this client's heard about you. You can see that you have a drop down where you can select from a list of options here, Or you also have a browse button that you can click on to select a different client that might be doing the referring. So just typing in their name in the client field, you'd be able to double click on them, and then it links that as the referral. This is beneficial because there's a built-in report in AVImark that will track referrals for you. So it's a good way for you to be able to tell if your particular advertising is paying off. Your date of birth field is, again, a state requirement for controlled substance reporting. So if your state makes you get the birth date of the client, you'd want to select that from your drop-down calendar right here. Added is just showing you the date that this client was added into your system. And added by is going to show you the ID of the employee who was logged in when they were added. Folder is just another FYI field that you can type in the paper chart, the folder number of this client if you have one. And your class drop-down has to do with setting up automatic discounting in AVImark. So basically here you're telling the program which client discount class this client would fall into. So if you had discounts for senior citizens or employees or military, you would see those options in here and select the appropriate one. Now, here are your codes, and these are action codes in AVImark, and when assigned to a client, it just tells the program how to treat that client. So you can see that by simply adding in a new client, that automatically has the A action code listed here. And that just means that that client is active. Now, some of the most common ones that you're going to be using in here first, you have the C action code, which tells AVImark that this client's credit's pre-approved. A lot of clinics will use this for clients who have already read or applied for or sent applications in for care credit and have been approved, so they don't have to do it each time. Anytime you have this C action code on a client, it's going to cause an alert to pop up on their account, so that every time you pull that client up, you're going to see an alert pop up that says client's credit is pre-approved. The next one that you may use fairly frequently is your E action code. And this tells AVImark that this client is tax exempt. So none of the patients on this client's file would ever have tax applied on their invoices. Next one that you have is an I action code, which is basically the exact opposite of your A action code. Your I action code, when given to a client, will mark that client inactive. Anytime a client is marked inactive, they will no longer be printed out statements, and they will no longer have any reminder cards for their patients sent to them. Here is the one, the Q action code is what you have to give your client in order to make that spouse field searchable. So again, it's just going to become a habit. If a client tells you the name of someone else that might be bringing in their animals, you're typing that in that spouse field and instantly coming down here and giving that client the Q action code. Last one that I want to point out is your X action code. And this is, again, basically the exact opposite of your C. This tells AVImark that this client is a cash-only client. So this is the one that you're going to want to use for clients that may have written bad checks in the past, or they've just had a problem with not paying their bill. Whenever you have this X action code on a client, it causes an alert to come up on their account so that as soon as you pull them up, you'd see client is cash only. Also, when they have this action code, when you're posting their charges to accounting, you would see that again. So it's another reminder that you can only accept cash or potentially debit payments from that client. Now, you can select an action code by left-clicking on it from this list, or you could...
She's answered it now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You already answered it when you added the second action code.
Oh, okay. So you can select the action code from the drop-down, or if you knew which one you needed to enter, like when it comes to that cue, you could instantly just type it in there as well. Now, you can add up to 8 action codes on a client at one time. Next to that, you have a Suspend Reminders option, and this is what you would want to select if you did not want to print reminder cards or send reminder emails to any of the patients on this client's file. This is a good feature to use if you have, for example, rescues entered into your database. Potentially you're only seeing that patient once, maybe twice before they get adopted out, so you don't want to be sending that rescue reminders on a monthly basis because of the patients that they've brought in the past. Then you have this Suspend Until field right beneath that, and that just allows you to suspend the reminders until a very specific date that you specify from this date drop-down. Now, once you've gotten all of your new client information added, you're going to simply hit OK. And AVImark knows anytime you're entering in a new client that you're going to be entering in a new patient as well. So it's going to instantly bring up this new patient window for you, where you're going to be able to type in, of course, the name of the patient and select the species from your species drop-down. Now, this species drop-down is customizable, so if you see things in here that you guys don't typically see, then we can remove from it and we can add to it. And the same goes for your breed and color drop-downs as well. And just like with those action codes we mentioned a moment ago, you can select your breeds from your breed drop-down if you want to start scrolling. Or what I like to do is just begin typing the name of the breed in here, and then I can select it from the options that come up. And it's the exact same thing with your color. You can come in here and select from the drop-down or begin typing it in to find it as well. Now, your birthday field here and your age field here work correspondingly together, because if the client comes in with their new patient and they know exactly when the patient's birthday is, you're going to be able to select that from the drop-down calendar here. You can use your arrows to select the correct birthday, or if you'd like and can remember the format to type it in, you can also just type it in your birthday field here as well, just making sure that you use that month, day, year format. And see how that instantly automatically made my age 14 months? Now, if it's the exact opposite, maybe they've just gotten this animal from a rescue and they're not exactly sure how old it is, you can also just come to the age field. Maybe after the appointment, the doctor verified that they're around 8 months old. You can just type in 8M here, and then when you click out of this field, it's going to instantly adjust your birthday for you. And that abbreviation works for D for days, W for weeks, and Y for years as well. Now, of course, you have your sex drop-down where you can specify whether the patient's male or female, and even whether or not they've been spayed or neutered. And you have a weight field here. And the only time you want to enter in the patient's weight from this window is the very first time they're coming in, if they bring a previous chart with them. Because if you're doing the exam and you're entering in the weight, you really want to do that in medical condition records. And we're going to talk about that at a later session. Now, just like in the client area, your patients have action codes that you can use as well. Not nearly as many, but still important ones. First, you have the D action code, which, when given to a patient, marks that patient deceased. Now, the only time that you should have to do this is if the client calls you to let you know the patient has passed away at home, or if maybe they were on their way to the clinic and just didn't make it in time. Because when you are performing the euthanasia, that's going to automatically mark that patient deceased for you. So you're not going to have to try to double back and remember to do it. You have your same E-action code, which tells AVImark that just this individual patient is tax exempt. So if you had a client that maybe not all of their animals that they had on their account qualified for that exemption, just one did, you can make it patient specific. Your H action code allows you to suspend the reminders from an individual patient as opposed to all of them like you can from the client area. I would mark this individual patient inactive, and M is what you're going to put on your patients that the client's called to let you know either they're moving or this patient is missing as well. The reason that you want to do that is because if a patient has any one of these 4 action codes, the M, the I, the H, or the D, that means that that patient is not going to be printed or emailed any type of reminder. Now, last one that I want to point out is this star or asterisk action code. When given to a patient, that marks that patient as aggressive. And whenever you mark a patient aggressive, that causes an alert to come up on their account, again, every time you pull them up, and it's going to just say in big capital letters, patient is aggressive. Now at that point, and you'll see it here in just a moment, in your alert window, there is a notes section. So maybe this patient isn't necessarily human aggressive, maybe they're just food aggressive or other animal aggressive. You'd be able to specify that type right there in the notes. Now here you have a rabies field and you have a microchip field. And this is where you're going to be able to type in the rabies tag number and the microchip number. Again, the only time you should have to manually do this is if they're coming to you previously chipped from another clinic or they're coming in with a valid rabies tag. Because if you are performing these services, a box will come up asking you what those numbers are when you place them in medical history, and then AVImark copies that into these fields for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, it is important that you have the correct information listed in these fields here because they're both searchable from the search screen in AVImark. So if someone brought in a lost dog and you scanned it and saw that they had a microchip, within seconds you'd be able to find out if that was your patient. Photo is just going to show you if there is a photo attached to this patient, and I'll show you how you can attach a photo here in a few moments. Your folder field, just like in the client area, is going to allow you to type in the folder number of this patient's physical chart if you have those. Added is just showing you the date that the patient was added into your system. And your allergy field allows you to select a specific allergy that this pet may have. Now, that being said, you can only make one selection from this drop-down. So if you had a patient that had multiple allergies, what I would recommend, since this drop-down is customizable, creating an entry that says multiple. And anytime you have a patient with an allergy assigned to them, that's going to cause an alert, again, to pop up on that account. So as soon as you pull them up, it's going to say patient is allergic and list whatever you've selected in this window. So if you did say multiple in that notes section of your alert, that's where you could list out everything that they're allergic to. Now, these fields over to the right are mostly fields AVImark populates for you on its own, and it's only going to put something in there if you're using specific features. So your plan section here is only going to show you something if you're using wellness plans, and it's going to show just what plan this patient is on and when it expires. Same with wellness discount. If you're not using wellness plans, you'll never see anything in here, but if you are, it's going to show you if this patient's getting an additional discount for being on a wellness plan. Your class field, just like in the client area, has to do with setting up automatic discounting. So you can make your automatic discounts patient-specific if you'd like, as opposed to client-specific. Reminded is just going to show you the last date that this patient was physically printed a reminder card. And Suspend Until is going to allow you to suspend the reminders for this patient until a specific date, just like in the client area. And your deceased field is going to show you the date that this patient was marked deceased. Now, as soon as you hit OK, that's going to fill in that patient area for us now. Here's the alert box that I was telling you about. It's coming up because we've marked Lady as being aggressive with the star action code, and we assigned an allergy to her, so it's bringing up that allergy as well. Beneath it, this is where the notes box is, so this is where you'd be able to type in what type of aggressive she is. Food aggressive, just like me. And you could also click on medical alert if it was something coming up because it was an allergy. It changes it from the normal yellow color to this brighter red, so it's more noticeable. And you just hit continue out of it after you've read it. Now, that being said, there are a few right-click options for your clients and patients that I want to point out because they are important. From your client area, when we right-click, we know what new does. That's going to allow us to add a new client. Change is going to allow us to change something about that client. So if they came in and said, oh, hey, we've moved and we've got a new address, this is what you would do to bring up that client information window again. Notes is where you can type in specific notes about this client. If it were me and I worked in a clinic, I would use this notes feature for potential payment arrangements maybe that I'd spoken to the client about, or conversations that I just wanted documented. I would put that information in here because there's not a very obvious way to tell that there is a note attached to the client. The only way you'd notice it is if your client area is selected. Over here under attachments, you see notes is red and has a check mark next to it. Now, remove, which we want to be careful not to click on, is going to just start the removing process of this client. So basically, you'd be deleting them from your system. If you did click on it, even on accident, there is a confirm box that would come up, so you still have time to back out of it. Accounting is going to just open up the client's accounting, so you'll be able to see all of their past payments and invoices. Alert is how you can either look at an alert again that's already attached to the client area, or how you can create a new one. Close is going to close this client off of your screen. So see how right now I have 2 clients open? That's because AVImark will allow you to keep 10 open at a time. So if you're completely done working with one, you can just hit close and it would close them off the screen. Instructions are going to be one-time invoice instructions that you attach to the client and have them print out on their invoice.
Beth?
If you use, yes?
I had a question real quick. You don't, in our current system, oftentimes we run into a situation where a client is active or open on another terminal and they can't
do anything with it
out at the front desk. Is that ever an issue in AVImark? I don't remember.
Nope. You can have that client open on multiple computers and still be able to do things on there, whether it's putting in charges or putting on notes or posting the invoice. Hopefully you wouldn't be posting it until they were done putting in charges, but that file would still be able to be open on other computers. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right.
So instructions, will you say that again?
Yes, and I'm going to show you another way to put instructions on that I personally prefer, but if you put instructions on this way, from right-clicking in the client area and going to instructions, you really want to make sure that your charges haven't been posted to accounting yet, because then your instructions won't have printed on the proper invoice. They'll just sit in there and wait until the next time that client has an invoice. So that's why I say it's kind of hard to remember with this route that you put it in before the invoice is posted. Does that make sense?
Not yet.
Fairly.
So you should do this way because you're not certain if the invoice has already been, if they've already been invoiced.
So let's just don't use it.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I feel mean saying that, but I completely agree 100%. You can attach instructions to specific line entries in medical history, which we're going to get to here in a few moments, and that's the route that I prefer. Label is going to allow you to print out a mailing label for the client and send email. If you have your AVImark set up to email, is going to begin the process of you being able to send that client an email. Your patient area has quite a bit more. I promise I'm not going to bore you with every single one, but there are some big ones in here that I want to talk about. The first few are basically exactly the same. New, change, notes, post and remove. Even alerts does the exact same thing. It's just referring to patient alerts instead of client alerts. Now your chart option here is something that we are going to take a few minutes to go over. This, when selected, is going to print out your history for the animal. So if a client comes in and says, hey, we're moving, I need Lady's chart to take to the new vet that we have, or an existing clinic or an emergency clinic calls and says, hey, we've got Lady here, we really need you to send us her chart. This is what you're going to be selecting. So again, from the patient area, you're just doing a right-click chart, and it's going to bring up your chart window for you. In here, under Include the Following, this is where you can specify to AVImark what you want printed on that chart. So I hate to state the obvious, but if there's a check mark next to the option, that means it's being included. Now, there's a few that I want to point out here. You have the ability to tell AVImark whether or not you would like your client alert printed out on your chart or your patient alert printed out on your chart. Now, the only reason I'm pointing these out is because I have worked with clinics that put certain information in an alert, such as client is a pain or something along those lines. And while it's nice to be able to bring that up, like if you have a new receptionist that doesn't know this client's history, so that they're alert or their knowledge of it, but if the client were to see something like that, they may get their feelings hurt. Same with the patient alert. Also, as far as the patient alert is concerned, if you've marked that patient aggressive, that's going to print out on the chart. And we all know that could be the honest to God truth. That animal could be the meanest one you've ever met, but you don't want if the client saw that, again, we don't want any clients with hurt feelings. Also, you have a charges option here. If this was a chart that I was sending to a completely different clinic, I wouldn't want them to see what I charge for my services. So making sure that that's not checked will prevent that from happening. But really the rest of them shouldn't be as big of a deal unless, again, you put sensitive information in your notes, like your client notes or your patient notes. Then you'd want to make sure that those options are unchecked. But what I always tell clinics to do is look through these and check the ones that you want to always default to being selected. And then come down here and click on Save Settings on Close and Save Settings for all users. And then as soon as you hit Cancel or Print, the next time you go in, those options will be the ones that are automatically selected. Now, up here in the upper left-hand corner, you have your print options. So you have two options here, print using chart terms or print using date range. Your chart terms are where you can set a default. Every time I print the chart, I want to print it for this long. So you have a field here where you can adjust your number. And from your visits drop-down, you can either select days, months, or leave it as visits. Your print using date range option allows you to specify a specific date range that you would like to print the chart for. Now, this next one's important. If you ever need to print out the entire chart for a patient, you're going to put the bullet next to print using date range and leave your from and to fields completely blank. That's how AVImark knows that you want to print out the entire chart. Okay? All right. Now, the next one I want to talk about is document. This is just going to allow you to print out a specific document for the patient. Like if they came in and said that they were going on vacation and needed a health certificate. You'd be able to come to the patient area of that patient they needed it for, right-click and select document, and then in this red box, right-click choose, and then in your documents window, just select your health document. Or if you make your own health certificate, either way. Here is another instructions option. Again, not my favorite because you have to remember to add these in before the invoice is posted. Move is going to allow you to move this patient from one client to a completely different client. Photos is where you're going to go to attach a patient photo. So once you've taken the picture and uploaded it onto your computer, you're going to go to the patient area, right-click, come down to Photos, and select My Photo. And then in here, just go to File and Open. And again, browse to wherever you've saved that image at. Sometimes it's easier to save them just in a folder on your desktop, but you just double-click on it. And then you just go to File and Save, so it saves it onto that animal. And then you just hit OK, and that photo shows in the upper right-hand corner. Also, you can set it to where that photo prints out on the client's invoice too, which they always like. All right, Undelete is going to allow you to begin the process of undeleting the patient if you ever accidentally deleted them. VAC history is where you're going to want to go to put in the vaccine history of this animal. So if it was an older patient brought in from another clinic, you would be able to select from the date given drop-down when they had these vaccines in the past. So right now there's no reminders set up on anything, but in the future and when you go live with AVImark, you'll have reminders set up on at least all of your vaccines, so they would be showing all of the vaccines appropriate for this species in this window. And lastly here you've got your weight history option. This is going to show you all of the weights that have been entered into medical condition records for this patient. That's why it's important to enter those weights into medical condition records. All right, do you guys have any questions about clients and patients?
I do.
Okay.
For the action codes, is it the same as like allergies where you can only select one of them?
Nope, just like in the client area, if you're in the patient area, you can attach up to 8 action codes on a patient as well. And again, you can either select them from the drop-down or type them in manually if you knew which one to use. Now, when it comes to action codes, they are hard-coded, so it's not something that we can add more action codes to, unfortunately. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, so now we're going to get to talking about entering medical history. If you haven't already noticed a pattern, one way that you can do that is to come down to medical history. Can you see where the line's highlighted in white? That's how we can tell that medical history is selected. You can simply right-click and come up to new, surprise, and that's going to bring up your new medical history window. Also, again, you can also hit your F2 button. That will bring up the same one. I'm sorry?
Nothing.
Oh, I thought there was a question. I apologize. When you're in here, if you know what your codes are, you're definitely welcome to just instantly type in a code. Or if you don't know the code, what you can do is come here to your description and type in a portion of what you want to enter as well. So if I wanted just my exam, I would double click on it here. And we need to quickly just add a doctor real fast.
Why don't I do that real quick, Beth?
Yeah, do you mind? I'm sorry about that. Now the only other thing that you want to do, yeah, give her an ID. And we have to put in a password. But check that option user is a doctor there towards the middle. There you go. And then just hit OK.
Now, do I need to know that password?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll set it.
But now you'll need to change it. All right, so again, right click, new, and we can either type the code directly in or use our description field. Whichever one that you find yourself utilizing the most, we can have the cursor automatically be in that field for you. So if you find that you are majority of the time using the description field as opposed to the code field, we can have it automatically open up and have your cursor in the description.
Can we delete?
Now, after you, I'm sorry?
Can we delete things we'll never do, like the equine stuff?
Yes.
Oh, for sure. Now, that's the only time that I would suggest deleting codes out of AVImark is before you've ever started using them. And that's another conversation for a later time. But after you select your code that you're wanting to put in, you have to choose a doctor, but then you're just simply hitting done, and that charge has gone into medical history. It always brings up another enter medical history window for you because it thinks that you'd like to enter in something else. So we'll say we want to put in some frontline too. All I did was double left clicked on it. It filled out the rest of that window for me. It doesn't have a price, so just this one instance, I'm going to manually put a price in here. And then I'm just hitting done. And now both of those charges are in medical history. So that's one route that you can take to get charges entered if you're doing one at a time. A lot of times this is what front desk will do, like if a client comes in just to buy some prevention or just to buy some food, this is going to be the fastest route for you. But for like your doctors and technicians, if the client's coming in or the patient's coming in to get, for example, several vaccines, another way that you can enter in charges is to right click, and instead of coming to new, you can come to choose and select treatments. And this opens up your treatment list, and you can actually select multiple things. So if I knew that I was putting in several canine vaccines, I could scroll down to my vaccines category for canines and simply left click on each of the vaccines that they're getting.
Jeez.
See how that puts them all down into my selected box for me? I have a doctor already chosen because it's holding the last one I chose for the entries that I put in medical history a moment ago. Now I can hit done, and all 5 of those are going to go into medical history for me automatically. So you can see how potentially that could be a little bit faster than putting them each in one at a time. Either way works. There's not necessarily one that's better than the other. It's just whatever your preference is. Me, personally, I like getting things done in as few clicks as possible. So if I knew I had several services to put in, I would just open up the treatment list and do it from right there. And the same thing works if you go to right-click choose. You could enter in several inventory items or prescriptions as well. But as far as putting things in medical history, honestly, that's pretty much it. AVImark differs from a lot of other softwares because in other softwares you build invoices, and as far as AVImark is concerned, you put the charges in medical history and then build the invoice from, or create the invoice from that. So it is a little different, but some things that you can do to these entries once they're placed in medical history. See how right now I have the annual exam selected, and I can tell because it's highlighted in white. Again, we have some right-click options in here, and I promise I'm not going to talk about every single one of them, but there are some important ones that you're going to want to know how they work and how to do it. So if I wanted to type in a note about this exam, I'd be able to right-click on it, come up to my notes option here, and select Enter Notes. Type it in. Whenever you're putting a note in AVImark, I personally always start it with doing a Control-D, and that puts in a date timestamp. So you're going to be able to see the time that that note was entered. And when you start logging in with passwords, you're also going to see the ID of the user as well. And then whenever you hit done, that note will actually show in medical history.
I want to hang on one second, Beth. This is not how our medical notes are going to be done. So don't think this is where your soap note goes.
Oh, right. Your soap information goes in medical condition records.
So you could say, you could put a note in there, recheck in 3 days, or so that it prints on the invoice. Yes, things like that. But this is not where your medical notes go.
Thank you.
You have time? Are we going to see a medical condition screen?
That's usually in a separate training session. I could show it to you guys if you want to see what it looks like real fast. Whenever you right-click on this exam, you've got a med condition option right here. If you select that, this is your medical condition record. Now, like I said before, and it sounds like you guys are going to be utilizing it, which is really awesome. In your weight field, you've got your vitals listed here at the top. And this is where it's very important that you make sure you're entering your weights, because placing them in here is what's going to save them in your patient's weight history. Now, like I said, we're going to have a session dedicated strictly just to the medical condition record, because there's a lot of features that you can use in here to make filling it out easier and faster. Now, you also have a declined option that you can select. So let's say you spoke to the client about having some blood work done. And we're going to add that into medical history here. And the client said, I'd rather not do that today. I don't have the funds to really get that. Or they just flat out don't want it. You can still put that code in medical history, and you really want to, and just right-click on it and come to declined here, because then you've documented in the program that you recommended this particular procedure, and ultimately the client declined it. That way, if they tried coming in again, not saying you'd have anyone that would do this, and they tried to say something along the lines of, well, you didn't tell me that I needed this, then you would easily be able to show them on the machine, oh, no, it looks like we did talk about it on November 16th and you declined it.
You can
politely, of course.
I think that it's an option. You can choose to print declined items on the invoice. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And can't you choose multiple items at once?
I'm sorry?
Can't you choose multiple items at once and decline them?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought.
You can highlight multiple entries if you left click on the top one and hold down your left mouse button and just drag it down, and then right click and come to decline. And you just keep clicking yes to the options. Are you sure you want to decline those?
Can you undecline it?
You sure can if you right click on them, or even if we highlighted them all again, you can right click, and now because they're in alphabetical order, you'd come down towards the bottom, and then here's your undecline option.
Okay.
I like it.
So you would just do that for each one as well. All right? Now, you also have a discount option in your right click menu. This is how you would just give a quick on-the-fly discount.
No, you don't need to go over
it. Okay.
We really don't want to see that.
Go ahead. But
Oh, if you did want to do this, let's say this client had waited an extra long time because an emergency came in, and you just wanted to do it as a thank you. If you highlight the entry in medical history you want to discount, and just right-click on it and select your discount option, in the supply discount of field, you just type in the % discount that you want to give, and then when you hit continue, it adjusts your price for you automatically.
Now, can you do that with the case care stuff? Like, how's that going to be set up? Like, if they're a case care person?
There's the option to be able to some are discountable, some are not. So you don't have to figure it out yourself, take 10% off, put that amount in. It's going to
It doesn't show we got a discount.
I think it does. It will on the invoice. It will show the discount, right? I think it's at the bottom.
You have the ability to, yes. Some clinics don't like it, so it's an option that you have the ability to turn on or off. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want it to, but apparently there was someone at some point in time. Here's the doctor's instructions that I personally prefer. You can go to that specific entry in medical history and right-click on it and come to doctor's instructions. The doctor's instructions is a better option if you want something to print out on your invoice as opposed to the notes. Because for doctor's instructions, you just type in the verbiage there, and you don't have to do anything else to have it print out on your invoice.
Can you show the glossary for a second?
Yeah. If you come to Glossary and go to View Glossary, this is where you can store commonly used note templates so that you don't have to type everything out every single time. And we'll talk about this, too, when we have the medical condition record session.
Can you have notes? You can attach notes to specific service codes so that those notes always.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep. This would just be on-the-fly doctor's instructions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I know.
Okay. Now here you have your drug label option. So if you needed to print out a drug label, say for example for this front line, if it was maybe they bought the entire box, you would just right click on it and come to drug label. Your drug label window opens. You can, since this is front line, you'd want to type out how you'd like it to read.
These are also saved. Come in once and it'll always pull up the same.
Yes.
And like I think someone's saying, you can also save drug labels on items so that you don't have to do this each time. But if it was a prescription, you also have a wizard here at the top that you can select to give you kind of an outline to where all you have to do is just plug in numbers and make selections from drop downs. But then of course you would be hitting print. I'm going to hit done, but the nice thing about these drug labels too is that those notes show in medical history. So if the client were to call back and say, how was I supposed to administer this medication again? You'd be able to look just right there on the notes and see it quickly without having to go back and look in any chart.
Yes.
All right. You have the ability also to move medical history from one patient to a completely different patient. So if you accidentally put the charges on the wrong file, you could easily move it by highlighting them all and selecting your Move to Patient option. Or if you just wanted to rearrange the order, you could move it up or down in medical history as well. here is your undelete option. So if you did have a charge that you accidentally deleted, or you just have an inkling that charges got deleted off of a file, this is how you'd be able to see that. And here on vaccination, let's click on. If we right click on this vaccine and come down to vaccination, this is where you can enter in the vaccine information for that vaccine. Now too, we can also make this automatic, and you can attach it to your treatments so that this is pre-populated for you and you don't have to do anything else.
Yeah, the big thing is you have to remember to change your serial numbers every time.
Carton.
Yeah.
Every time you open a new tray, you just go into one place if you have it set and update that. All the ones you entered in previously have the old information, and all the ones that you would enter from that point on would have the updated information. All right, well, do you guys have any questions about putting charges in medical history? Pretty straightforward, I think. And like I said, you've probably already noticed that repetition I was talking about. If you wanted to add something in new, you just do a right-click new or hit your F2 button. Or you can right-click and come to choose to actually open up one of your lists to put in several at a time. Make sense?
Yes.
All right. Now the next time we have a session, like I mentioned before, that's going to be with Sarah. And she's going to be talking about posting these charges to accounting and creating your invoices and taking payments, along with other accounting scenarios like returns, deposits, things like that. And then also she's going to talk about estimates as well.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Oh, you're very welcome. And if you guys have any questions in the meantime, you know I've strategically placed my email address on this test file, so you can reach me by email if you'd like. I'd be happy to help any way that I can.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And I don't know if you want to stop the recording now.